Welcome to this week's CONEX. This week we have Steve Ford from Garney, and I've known Steve for quite some time, and he was generous enough to give us a little bit of his time today so we could, ask him some questions and kind of go through what we typically go through. And Steve, rather than me introduce you, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about Garney?
Okay. Well, like Scott said, my name is Steve Ford. I am a regional vice president with Garney Construction. The official name of the company is Garney Companies Incorporated, but we just go by Garney Construction. Garney is a 100% employee-owned company, largely a self-performing contractor. In other words, we self-perform most of the work on the projects that we undertake, and we have operations coast to coast. I didn't think that I would live long enough to see us have an office in California, but we do. So we operate coast to coast. The core focus of the company is water and wastewater infrastructure. So anything water and wastewater related, from pump stations, treatment plants, storage tanks, pipelines, anything water and wastewater related, and we do both new construction and rehabilitation of existing water and wastewater systems. Garney has been around for a while. It started in 1961 by Charles Garney. I started with Garney in 1979, and right out of college, and traveled around quite a bit with Garney, from Missouri to Oklahoma, Arkansas, Texas, Maryland, Virginia, and then finally ended up in Tennessee. And over my career, I've actually opened 4 different regional offices for Garney. The first in Austin, Texas, the second in Sterling, Virginia, the third one in Nashville, Tennessee, and then actually opened an office again up in Northern Virginia and Chantilly, Virginia.
What, Steve, how did you kind of come, kind of back up, where'd you grow up, and, kind of walk me through how you came from where you were to where you are today?
Well, I don't want to bore you with too many details. I was actually born in Nigeria, Africa. My mom and dad were missionaries in Nigeria. The interesting thing about that story is they went over to Nigeria as single missionaries and actually met in Nigeria and got married. And so I was born in Ogbomoso, Nigeria, and lived the first 8 years of my childhood there before moving back to the States for good in 1965. I consider Missouri, my mom is from Missouri, and I consider that Jackson, Missouri, my hometown. And my senior year in high school, I thought I wanted to be an architect, but I couldn't afford to go to the only architect school in Missouri, which was a private school. And so I figured civil engineering was the next best thing to it. And so I got a degree in civil engineering at what was at the time known as University of Missouri Rolla, previously known as Missouri School of Mines and Metallurgy, and now known as Missouri University of Science and Technology. So that's where I got my civil engineering degree in 1979. And that year, Garney came to Rolla to recruit. I joke with everybody because I think that's the only year they came to Rolla to recruit. I figure they figured, well, if the best they can do is Steve Ford, we don't need to go back there again.
So then you came to Garney. When did you start at Garney?
Well, I started with Garney originally right out of college in 1979, and spent 13 years with them that first stint. And then actually when my wife and I moved from the Washington D.C. area or Northern Virginia area to Nashville. I actually left Garney for a while when I first moved to Nashville, and went to work for a company here in Nashville called W.L. Haley and Company, and then I went back to work for Garney in 2003 and opened the regional office here in Nashville for Garney.
Yeah, and that's when I actually had the pleasure of meeting you, and I know because you guys were actively recruiting up at Eastern Kentucky, and um, so that's interesting that you were you were born in Nigeria. I didn't know that at all. Honestly, I never would have guessed it. I thought you grew up in the backwoods of Tennessee.
Well, I sound like it.
Oh shoot. So what? So the core focus of Garney is anything water related.
Yes, clean. We call it clean water and dirty water. So yeah, anything water related. That's our primary focus and certainly our core business.
Now, what I think is interesting about Garney is that I've had the pleasure over the last, gosh, man, I've known you for about 12, 13 years now. Seeing Garney from going 12, 13 years ago to this today, as you said, from coast to coast. When I first met you, I thought, this is like a small to a mid-sized company. That was my perception. And then I had several students that graduate and move on, and friends move on and go work at Garney. And you guys have had an explosion in growth over the last, say, 10 years.
That's true. At the same time, I would say this, that your perception of us being a small company, Garney is obviously a whole lot bigger company today than they were when I went to work for Garney in '79. But I like to say that we are a huge company with a small company culture. Mm-hmm. And so in a lot of ways, we don't mind the fact that people's perception is that we're a small company. I just think that's the culture of the company as it relates to internal relationships. But yes, you're right. I mean, the company has grown leaps and bounds.
And I think that's what's unique about you guys too, is because you kind of get that feel, and at least I get that feel, because when I deal with Garney, there's a lot of relationships there, and it's not like, hey, call our corporate office, it's a relationship. So what significant event do you think has shaped the business model that you have today?
Well, I think 2 or 3 things that come to mind. I actually, when I look back on my extensive tenure and experience with Garney, I think that market downturns and recessions have really shaped our business model. Mm-hmm. I know when Garney even originally hired me in '79, Charles Garney had made the decision. The market in Kansas City had taken a significantly huge downturn and decided that we needed to look outside Kansas City. And so they started hiring young engineers or young kids right out of school so they could pair them up with superintendents and send them on out-of-town jobs. And I think that business model of Garney being willing to go where the work is and where the opportunities are has really shaped our business model. The other 2 things I would attribute really to Charles Garney himself, and that is our core values, what we refer to as our goals and philosophies, which for us are more than just words on a paper. I mean, it's how we operate, it's the words we live by, and Charles Garney gets the credit for developing those core values. And then, obviously Charles Garney's decision to sell the company to the employees was a hugely significant event that's helped shape our business model.
Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead.
What I was gonna say is that, um, you guys were my first introduction to kind of understanding how an ESOP kind of works, and I've just talking with people who have gone on and worked for Garney and just seeing how how it's worked, and you guys are a pretty good model of how an ESOP should work, I should say. At least that's my opinion.
Yeah, I think, I do think that, forming an ESOP and having an employee-owned company does not guarantee success. I think it has to go hand in hand with having, good, strong core values and a good business plan. But certainly, that was a game changer for us. And, Charles started selling the company in 1986. And then the company became 100% employee owned in 1995. And ever since 1995, when we became 100% employee owned, the success of the company has been nothing but uphill. And, the employee ownership does two things. It provides a real incentive and drive for people to perform because they have a stake in the game, and the other is it creates peer pressure. If you expect everybody that's working side by side with you to be pulling the rope just as hard as you are, because we're all employee owners.
And that's what I think is really interesting is, I've seen it in the different where management only owns the company, and then when everybody owns the company, and the fact that the guy down in the hole owns part of the company is pretty significant, or at least that's what I've been told by the people that work for you guys.
It's hugely significant, and there are companies that say they're 100% employee owned, and for some that means that 100% of the stock is owned by employees. But as you mentioned, with us, it means more than that. We're 100% employee owned, so not only is 100% of the stock owned by employees, but 100% of the employees participate, including our laborers, operators, carpenters, ironworkers. Everybody is part owner of the company.
So how is Garney today preparing for the future?
Well, that's, I think most people, we do have, we're in sort of an interesting time at Garney right now, in that probably over the next 5 years, we're going to have some real senior officers retire from Garney. And so, we're in the process of going through, really a lot of transition planning. I think that, I've always been a firm believer that you constantly hire and retain top-notch talent. I'm a firm believer that that's the best way to always prepare for the future. And, one of our core, I talked a while ago about our core goals and philosophies. One of them is to allow every employee owner to achieve their full potential. And we practice that like nowhere I've ever worked before. And so, there's a lot of talk out there, of course, about the next recession. And, I've been around long enough to know that there will be another recession. It's just a matter of when. And so, we just, we're in this transition phase, making sure we can identify the future, prepare and identify the future leaders, including CEO, president, and COOs of the company over the next 5 years as we go through this transition. And I think, we're pretty set on, identifying internal candidates. We've always had best success promoting from within. Garney is a very, very different type company, and so we don't necessarily believe in going outside and trying to fill those positions. So there's a lot of work going on right now preparing for that.
So, you mentioned, every company has transitions, do you guys have a specific 5 or 10 year plan that you guys have put together? Um,
Well, we do have 5-year and 10-year plans, financial plans, and you know, we, uh, I'm going to sit here and say that bigger's not necessarily better. Even though we are a huge company, again, I think it goes back to the hiring and retaining top-notch talent. If you do that, you're going to grow. And so we do have, we do want to grow. We know, we want to get a good return for the stakeholders on their Garney stock and their Garney ESOP accounts. And so to achieve that, we know we have to grow earnings and we have to grow resources. But steady, steady long-term growth is what we're looking for. I do think that, we're probably better. We've gotten better over the last 2 or 3 years about, identify or, really strategically thinking about what the corporate structure should look like and who can fill different positions. I think we, here maybe 2 or 3 years ago, we kind of woke up and said, oh crap, if Mike Heitman, our CEO, is going to retire in 5 years, we better figure out real quickly who's going to replace him. So, but I think we have some processes in place now that are a lot better as far as making sure that's a continuous process.
well, one thing I had to say that I kind of stole from you guys from my own business is the concept of controlled growth. And
Yeah.
although I've said you guys have exploded, truly you've done it in a methodical manner. At least, once again, my perception of it, the way you guys have gone about things. A great example is that huge job, and I don't know if it's done or not, but that huge job you guys had in Texas, and
Yes.
the way you went about that, talking with individuals that kind of know how you guys protected your company and how you just went about it in general, just shows the thought process that kind of goes into that. And everyone wants to grow, but controlled growth is a hard thing. Just and it seems like you guys have a good handle on that.
Well, I think historically we've always been, we have plans to grow, but we also are relatively opportunistic, and I think that job in that project in Texas, I mean, it took that project was years in the development, and on the other hand, to a certain extent, we were in the right place at the right time. So, but you're right. I mean, it was a very, very methodical, well thought out process we went through in kind of landing that job and getting it under contract. And I think most of it's not totally sold, but I think most of the work, if not all the work, has been completed, other than maybe some startup operations. So we had some good field performance on that job.
So, just personally, what skills, because we have some, our audience is made up of people who are executives with companies, but it's also made up of young people, that have that desire. So I always like to go back and look at, somebody who is an executive within the construction arena and ask them, what skills and ability have you brought to the table to help your business?
Well, and let me say this too on the plan for growth. I mean, one of the things that we think is we look at all the time is diversification, and some would argue we're a very specialized company, and we are, but we do look at diversification, everything from the type of work, geographic diversification, customer base, and even procurement method. We really made some inroads on collaborative delivery. As far as personal skills, I think that, construction takes a lot of common sense. I think I have excellent common sense. I think that's something that's very important. I am very detail oriented, yet at the same time can see the big picture, but I think that detail oriented nature may come from my engineering background. I think over the years, one of my greatest strengths I believe I'm a strong team builder.
Mm-hmm.
And I can relate, when I say that, I'm talking about, not rah, go out and do a tug of war together. I'm talking about actually hiring and building a team. Construction is a very teamwork oriented business, and, there's no project can be built by one person. And so I think one of my greatest strengths has always been my ability to hire good people, even hire people that are better than me, and build a team. And then I also think I have a strong work acquisition aptitude. I think that one of the things that we find, and everybody finds in construction, is you're constantly building yourself out of work. And so, being able to acquire new work is important. And I do think that I have a good aptitude for work acquisition.
And you know what, that right there, and I've heard that same, common thread amongst people that we've had on the podcast, the ability to go out there and sell work and get, and figure that out is a very hard piece that a lot of times we don't give it the proper credit,
Sure.
So,
sure.
we talk about the technical aspects, but, selling work, we don't really talk about too much. But, in your life personally, professionally, or personally, what do you think has been your biggest successes and your biggest failures?
Well, I think biggest failures, when I look back, I think biggest failures I've had in my career have been related to misplaced trust. I think that, spending a lot of time recruiting and hiring people is important, and you do your best on the front end. I by nature am a very trusting person. And I think sometimes when you get the wrong person in the wrong position, or that misplaced trust, can bury you. And so, maybe the term trust but verify. I think that when I look back on my career and look at where I stubbed my toe, it normally is related to just misplaced trust.
And that's the old Ronald Reagan thing, trust but verify, huh?
Yeah.
What about successes wise? You know what, I think it's kind of funny too, and I'll just insert this, is that when I ask that question, normally people always jump to failures first. And I think one of the reasons for that is that us as anybody who's had some type of success in their life realizes that failure is an integral part of being successful.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and to that end, it's still somewhat related. I think that some of my biggest successes have just been hiring some damn good people, including my replacements. I'm not going to be around here forever, and I think that some of my biggest successes have been hiring, people that can carry the baton on. I think that, opening the office here in Nashville, and then reopening the office up in the Mid-Atlantic area, I would consider big successes. But it all goes back to people and hiring the right people.
So, what do you think the future of Garney is?
Well, I think It's interesting because when I graduated from college in '79, I had 17 job offers, and my offer from Garney was not the highest financial offer, but I honestly believe that Garney offered the greatest opportunity for professional growth and development. And understand that at that time, Garney was not employee owned. Charles Garney owned the whole thing, but I just had a good feeling about the company. So I think the future of Garney really boils down to tremendous opportunities. I think the employee ownership business model really is the ideal business model. And I also think we're in a good industry, and not that, we may not diversify at some point, but the water and wastewater industry is just a good industry to be in. I mean, when people turn on their tap in their kitchen, they want water to come out, and when they go in the bathroom, they flush the toilet, they want the water to go the opposite direction. So,
Yeah.
I think we're in a good industry.
Well, yeah, and it's one of those things. My father-in-law was a well driller, and he used to, say all the time that no one was ever concerned about water until they didn't have it.
Oh, no doubt, doubt,
And
no
which I
doubt.
know you guys know inside and out, so
Well, and yeah, I mean, lose power in your house, and you can get by lighting candles, but you lose water, it's amazing how quickly it's like, well, this isn't worth a crap.
So once again, I said that we have a group of people that listen to this podcast that are younger, and if you had to give or mid career people, if you had to give some personal advice to someone wanting to get to an executive level position in construction, what advice would you give them?
Well, I think first of all that anyone needs to understand that construction is a tough business. It really is a tough business. And so, having resilience and perseverance as personal traits are very important. It's hard work. I think, there are some things that I think are important to be successful. I think, and could boil it down to probably 5 or 6 words. Trust. I think trust is important. Respect. Respect the people you work with and the people that report to you. Humility. I think humility is extremely a strong trait for people. I talked earlier about teamwork. Teamwork. I think I believe in the saying, there's no limit what can be accomplished when no one cares who gets the credit. And teamwork is the most powerful force in construction because it's how we get projects built.
Mhm.
Then communication. I think communication, both verbal, oral, written, communication. I think when there are problems, so many times it can be traced back to a lack of communication. And then having a sense of urgency. Time is money. Time is critical. Time is of the essence, and so having a sense of urgency in this business is important to be successful. And then lastly, in an executive level position, I think you need to be entrepreneurial. I think you can't be totally risk averse. I mean, construction's a very risky business, but I think you need to be entrepreneurial to be, to reach, the highest levels of performance.
You mentioned something that I almost every single person that we have had a podcast with, and honestly that I've talked with, they always touch on the fact that those soft skills are so vitally important, which is contrary to what a lot of people who are younger believe. They believe it's the technical skills. Now, I'm not saying technical skills are not important. I come from the trades myself, you know,
Sure,
but
sure.
I realize that there is a point where, what, technical skills is not going to help you get promoted. It's going to be those soft skills like communication. I mean, you mentioned it right there. When you go to get a 4-year degree in construction management, you have like 5 different courses that are focused strictly just on communication, and there's a reason for that. So,
Yeah.
So kind of to sum it up, I want to go through and do kind of a flash session at the end. I'm gonna say a topic or an area in construction, and I want you to rate it from 1 to 10. 1 being the least important and 10 being the most important. And they could all be 10s, but I kind of want to get your perception. So if you want to explain why your number is what it is, that's fine. Or you don't want to give me a number, that's fine too. So with that said, the first one is scheduling.
Well, I think on a scale of 1 to 10, I would give scheduling an 8, but I would add to that there's, to me, and it depends on how you define it, but when I think of scheduling, I also think of the word planning, and I would give planning a 10. To me, scheduling, and maybe scheduling, when you say that, is meant to be synonymous with planning, but I think planning the work in this business to be successful, it certainly rates a 10, and then the scheduling process, I would certainly score an 8 because it's important, but probably more important than scheduling is planning.
Estimating.
Well, I think estimating is pretty darn important. I would give it at least a 9 because a good job begins with a good, thorough estimate. And so, if you don't have a proper estimate and cover your cost and do a sloppy job estimating, it's a formula for disaster. So I really would give estimating at least a 9.
Contract administration.
I would give that an 8. Again, it's very, very, very important. Very important.
Design.
I would, it probably depends. I would give it at least an 8. Some of the work we do is hard bid, it's design bid build, so we don't get into the design. Obviously, design on a design build project would probably score higher and be more important. But even on hard bid jobs, we pride ourselves in doing a lot of value engineering based on our experience, trying to figure out better ways to do things, and so even there, it's important. So I would give that at least an 8.
Contracts.
That's an interesting one. I would give it at least an 8. We have, and it really depends on the owner. I can think back in my history where we've signed some contracts that were pretty onerous, that any attorney would tell you you're out of your ever-loving mind if you sign that contract. But we were able to build the job successfully, and it was a successful job just because we had a good relationship with the owner. But particularly when you're going to work on a sizable job for an owner that you have not worked for before, that probably would score higher than an 8. But on a normal day-to-day, I'd score it an 8.
Accounting.
I think that based on my experience, again, I would give that at least an 8. And a lot of people will say, well, accounting, that just tells you the history, but we need to be thinking, but our accounting systems at Garney are very, very timely. I'm a firm believer in having detailed and timely job cost reporting, which is something that Charles Garney always believed in as well. And we really rely on our accounting department for good, timely information. And so I think knowing what your costs are is important, and we rely on accounting for that. So I'd say at least an 8.
Selling work.
Well, I would kind of I think having some of those skills is important. I would give that an 8, but I would also maybe mention something else that I would call relationship building, which I would rate a 10.
Mm-hmm.
And but that to me goes hand in hand with selling work, is building and maintaining those relationships. Being trustworthy, doing what you say you're going to do is how you build those relationships. That makes the selling work part easier. But Garney, over the last few years, has invested a lot in our business development and marketing people and processes and skills. And so I think as we try to do more collaborative delivery, that becomes more and more important.
And the last one, but not least, leadership.
I would score that a 10. I think that I think that not only at the top of the company, but regionally and even on specific projects, having the crew supervisor providing good leadership, leading by example, setting a standard for excellence. So at the project level, at the regional level, and at the corporate level, strong leadership in this tough business of construction is extremely important. And so I would give that a 10.
Well, that kind of sums up that 1 to 10 scale rating section we had, and I want to close it out and give you the last word, Steve. But first of all, I want to thank you for meeting with me today. I know you're a busy man, and I appreciate you spending some time with me this morning. I think it's extremely helpful and insightful. There is no other platform out there to put like-minded people together in the construction industry at this level, and that's one of the reasons we had we developed this podcast. And it's amazing what you can learn by just talking to people, and I want to thank you personally. I've had a chance to get to know you over the years, and I always say when people ask me, what do you know about Steve Ford? I said, Steve Ford has the best stories in the world. So, and if you don't believe me, go talk to him. So, but I want to give you the last word. Feel free to make any comments in general.
Well, I would just say, you ask about the future of Garney. I mean, I think that, and I've worked for, there's a lot of people that have worked for Garney their entire career, and so they don't have anything to compare it to. And I do have a couple of situations to compare it to, and I think it's just a great company, great industry, great culture. Our financially we're strong. Our reputation is strong. We have great people, strong culture, and we have great relationships and a great reputation. And I think those are not unique to Garney. There are certainly other companies that have the same attributes, but I think that taking a long, when you're in this business, don't think short term. Think long term. What if somebody looks back 20 years and looks at a decision you make? How will that decision be viewed? So always keep a long-term view. We're all in this for the long term, not short-term success. And so I think that's important for everybody in this business to keep in mind. And I appreciate you inviting me to participate. Not sure whether I offered anything insightful, but it's been enjoyable. Thank you.
Well, thank you again, Steve. And that's it for this week's podcast. We'll be back next week with another construction executive.